And recording. Hi, hello, welcome, Happy New Year. Um, Welcome to 2022 and welcome to Personality. This is, well, I guess I could quickly introduce myself a bit. I'm Christopher Collins. I will be our fearless leader, for better or worse, I guess, through this journey. And my background is actually more. I'm a behavioral neuroscientist, and I do work in kind of comparative animal behavior. So looking at basically behavior across species and how those things work. So that's kind of my arena. Those are my passions, and usually what that translates into, as far as like the courses that I have, things that I teach, stuff like that, is brain and behavior and statistics and research methods and all the ones everyone's favorites in the psych major. But this course, personality, is a not insignificant kind of departure from what I typically would be covering. Neuroscience and biology is much more sort of, I don't want to call it rigorous, but it's much more firmly in the seat of traditional sciences, that sort of thing. Statistical and scientific methodology and critical thinking, these sorts of things. Those are my usual wheelhouse, and I, of course, am going to, in this course, bring to bear as much of those things as I kind of can, because, well, that's kind of who I am. In terms of critical thinking and analysis of research and hypotheses and utilization of the scientific method and statistical output, some of that stuff, I mean, that bleeds into this course, but at the same time, the nature, the subject matter, the ideas, the things that we're going to be going through here in the coming weeks end up being way more, well, theoretical, more philosophical. They approach questions that are a little, they're less straightforward, right, than getting to some of the quote unquote simpler biological questions or aspects of research methodology, that sort of thing. So it's kind of a nice change of pace for me in a course like this to get shift a little further away from my more science-y rigor end of the spectrum, and still try to employ some of that thinking, but allow ourselves to expand a little more into, we spend a lot more time talking about the people, the ideas, and then of course what kind of research, data, empirical evidence there are in support of these approaches. But particularly, I feel like personality, much like so many of the terms that we use in the field of psychology, once we dive in this sort of more scholarly and academic way, we find that these words that we've been using almost our entire lives, just in passing and scarcely given a second thought, we when we really try to pin it down, which you'll see, like here at the front end, I'm going to be asking you things about, like, how do you think about personality? What constitutes personality? How do you define it or think about it, or try to, make sense of the idea? Because the initial part of the exercise, of course, is just to realize, number one, that's actually extremely hard to just define as an individual, to take this huge conceptual idea and to pin it down, particularly in a way that's like operational, where we can actually define it, measure it, make sense of it. That becomes exceedingly difficult from a scientific framework at any rate, but just philosophically too, trying to make sense of these ideas. So one of the very fun things about particularly this course is to start here on this front end, where sure, we throw the word personality around just like we do intelligence or depression or any other number of terms that refer to constructs, to psychological phenomena. But then we, of course, immediately recognize that these things, even though we all use them so casually with one another, are really hard to actually pin down, make sense of, and look at in anything approaching an objective manner. So we're going to have a lot of conversations, and that is going to manifest in the ways here. What I'm going to get into in a moment here is actually just the nuts and bolts of the course and that sort of a thing. And of course, what we're trying to do is to take that conceptual arena, that domain of thought, and to then explore it in the most academic, kind of rigorous way that we can by looking through the history and the various perspectives, the thinkers, the theories that have come about, and as I say, what's out there to support these things and where do these ideas come from. So let's go ahead and just actually dive into some of the nuts and bolts, because I don't want to make this an overly long video. It happens way too easily in my world. So, okay, what's that going to look like as far as how we interact? Particularly, what everybody really wants to know about is like, where are the points? How do the grades work? What can I anticipate and expect going forward? So, in that domain, I know this is the week where you're getting, like I say, getting syllabused to death, where you get these big long syllabi and every single one of them has a gazillion things about these accommodations and student conduct and these evaluations, and it gets to be a pain in the ass just trying to extract what the pertinent information is that you actually need to know. So I'm going to try to do that here, and in the process, hopefully also obviate a lot of the confusion, questions that you might have. I hope you're watching this video, because it's always extraordinarily frustrating to go through all of this in wonderful detail and anticipate all the questions and provide all the information and everything else, and come back a few days later and it's like, your video has 3 views, but my inbox has 98 emails with questions that are answered in the video. So thank you for watching this. If you do still have questions at the end, of course, let me know. But in terms of what to anticipate, what we're going to do, what it's going to count towards, and how that's going to work. So we have our textbook. Hopefully you saw that in the Beaver Store, on the Canvas site, in the syllabus, all of that. I've been using this book for a while. Generally, I get really good feedback on it. So hopefully it's going to continue to be a good resource. That's going to be our touchstone, of course, for the entirety of the course. So if you don't have it yet, whatever the case may be, if you're having problems, let me know that too, and we'll try to get that taken care of. But as far as, okay, how does that manifest? How are we going to do evaluation and things like that? The first bit that you will see is that we've laid it all out in probably almost all of your courses are like this, into modules, and the modules map onto the weeks. We have our 10-week term with the finals week. And so the allocation of the chapters then throughout those weeks will have to do with our readings, the lectures that are posted, what the content of the discussion forums that I'll talk about in a moment look like. But the first thing I wanted to touch on are the quizzes. So for each chapter, you will see that we have quizzes that are embedded into the Canvas shell that are part of every one of the modules. There should be no surprises insofar as these quizzes are concerned. They're very straightforward. They are derived directly from the readings and the lectures and the content, the stuff that we're covering, of course. The quizzes themselves, the way that they're constructed and kind of what goes into them, they're very open. These are not like a proctored situation. We'll talk about that when we get to the exams. So there's no proctoring, there's no big time limit, there's no constraints on sort of what you have available to you, which is to say, as you do the quizzes, you can have your book, you can have your notes, you can have the World Wide Web, you can have your friend, the personality researcher, your mom and dad, you can bring all those things to the table. That's fine. The quizzes are just there and pertain to each section along the way. Multiple choice style questions that are automatically, given the nature of how they're constructed. You get the feedback immediately as far as what you got right, what you missed, what the score is, that sort of thing. And I don't know what else to maybe say about those. Again, they're reasonably straightforward. I don't think there'll be anything too shocking as far as the quizzes go. Obviously, let me know if there's anything that you do want to know above and beyond that. But I made mention of the discussion forums, and one of the things that you're going to find in this course is that there's a lot of discussion that is going to be happening. And so my background, I've been in a number of universities, colleges. I've traditionally always been a lecture format person. I'm usually in the classroom lecturing and engaging in the conversation and doing the face-to-face thing, which I desperately miss. But we live now, right? We're going to the third year of this pandemic, which is striking when you say it out loud. But we've all had to adjust. So even some of us who typically wouldn't be in this online world and doing this kind of digitized version of things, here's where we find ourselves now. So some of you already know all of this. You're sort of comfortable. You know the ropes. You probably know them better than I do, some of y'all. And some of you others maybe are only just starting to kind of find your feet in this online world. So I'll come to this later, but please know that's why I'm here, and I'm always here for anything that you need in that regard. But insofar as the discussion forums then go, this is really the one place where we can come together as a group. We're very literally scattered around the globe as a cohort of individuals in this class. I myself live up here in Portland, but I often have students who are in Korea and in Poland and in South Africa. And so there's a massively asynchronous piece where we all kind of come to the course as it fits into our lives. Apparently, you have lives that exist outside of the classroom. I was recently informed of that. Who knew? But given that asynchrony and kind of all of us accessing this on our own schedule, the discussion forums are an opportunity where, okay, this week, here's what we're covering. We're going to talk about Freud and personality and aspects of the ego and blah, blah, blah. Great, and we can do the readings, and we can watch the videos, and we can watch the lectures, and whatever else that we're doing. The discussion forums are the place where, okay, we all come in, and here's a sort of open-ended question, or sometimes it'll be like an exercise. Hey, take this personality inventory or questionnaire, or hey, watch this video about actually what Carl Rogers' approach to humanistic psychology was, these sorts of things, and you will be prompted to engage whatever that prompt, that discussion is. Now, we're going to have, as promised, this is a big part of the course, we have 2 of these per week, 2 separate discussion forums. A couple things to know about them. The way that the discussion forums are put together, they are very purposeful in the sense that they do specifically ask you to watch the video or take this survey or to look at this paper or whatever the prompt is, but then it really leaves it very open-ended as to what direction you wish to take it, how you want to interpret it, what you want to emphasize, what you think was good and interesting, what you think was bad, or shortfalls, or whatever. You really do have an extraordinary amount of freedom to take that prompt and to do with it what you will. So in that sense, there should be very little stress associated with these posts. It's not about right and wrong answers. It's not about, I need you to make sure you say this bullet point and this concept and this person's name and that sort of a thing. It's really hard. There's not really wrong answers. I say that now. There sometimes are. But as long as you're talking about what the prompt was about and addressing it substantively, right? You, not just a few sentences, not just a, hey, thought Fromm was pretty interesting, am I right? That doesn't quite get it, right? Why? Why are you asking that? Why did it strike you? How does the idea relate to your life? Or how does it fit with a situation that you knew about, or something that's in the news, or something that was, Christ, even in a movie or something like, provided that you are speaking to the idea, to the concept, I mean, you really have so much latitude to do with it what you will. So that's great, and it should make it much, much less anxiety provoking, I suppose. But the crux there is the trade-off comes from, it's not about being like a quiz, right and wrong answers, deducting points for not saying something right or something like that. It's about engagement and it's about participation. So as you create your post, you take the prompt, you speak to the aspects that you wish to speak to, and you put your initial post out there. That's not the end of the story, right? It is a discussion where we are trying to come together. And not for a minute do I expect you're going to go through, read every other person's post all throughout the entirety of every single discussion. It's not that kind of a thing. But I want you to be reading some of them. And you can choose, you can scan through and find the ones that pop out. This is interesting to me, or, oh, this person often has interesting things to say, or is semi-like-minded, or whatever. I don't care how you choose to do that, but read some of the other posts and respond to them. Don't just put up a post and then move on with your stuff, because what people are sometimes surprised to find is, I read the prompt, I wrote the whole post, I even had like citations to other papers or books and ideas, and it was a really quality post. Great, but if you didn't engage it in any form that's conversational, you're not going to get full points for that. So just understand that. It's probably more than clear, and I'm just stating the obvious to you now, but it's not obvious to everybody. So make sure you're doing the discussions, make sure you're revisiting them. People are going to comment on your post. Respond to them. Engage. It doesn't have to be something that is massively time, resource, and energy consuming, but it does require enough attention that we are getting there. We're putting substantive ideas, thoughts, observations out there, and engaging our colleagues as we go along. And for me, given that this is not a classroom, I don't get to answer questions and engage topics and have back and forths with you guys the way that we would in a classroom in a traditional scholarly way. This is kind of the one place where I really get an opportunity to hear about your ideas, hear your perspectives, engage you, and those kinds of things. And so I will try to be as sort of active in that realm as I possibly can be too, given my schedule. That will provide heavy limitations, but we'll cross that bridge as we get there. So I hope that makes sense, and I'll be, of course, in touch going forward. I'll be giving feedback, and it should be very, very straightforward, I hope. Okay, let's get to the real thing here. Exams. Bum, bum, bum. So, like any good online course, we have a series of exams in the course. We have technically 3 of them. Let me first talk about the first 2, the quote-unquote midterms, which is a bit of a misnomer because neither one of them happens at the middle point of the term, but that's neither here nor there. We have 2 midterms that are your sort of traditional exams, exactly what you would sort of expect. They cover the content of what has taken place. So our first one will actually be coming up relatively quickly in week 4, which, believe me, it will be fast. By the time we get to week 4 and we have the first midterm, that will cover all of the content from right here, right now, until that point. And it is a proctored exam. So if you've been here at OSU anytime in the last about like 2 years now, we have moved to online proctoring. We use the program called Proctorio. If you've used it before, great. You know the drill, you know the ins and outs of it and all of that, splendid. If you've not used Proctorio, please do check it out. Go to the Start Here module. There's a full explanation of what it is, how it works, how to download it, how to test it to make sure that it works. I believe, still in 2022, only functions on Chrome as an operating system, which of course you can get on a Mac or a PC or anything like that, but limitations, certain things like that. And part of the reason I'm emphasizing this now is that it's really easy to skip over the same way we skip over all the bullshit in the Start Here modules and on the syllabus, and we ignore some of those things. And that what that usually happens is the very last day that the exam's available, with about 2 hours left, I get 800 emails saying, hey, what's Proctorio? So let's not do that. If you can look into that now, you are going to save yourself an extraordinary number of headaches and a lot of stress going forward with those. So we will have Proctorio on these midterms. We will do the first one. It will be proctored. It will be timed, but the time is, virtually infinite on it. I think it's set for like close to 2 hours, and it takes most people like 20 some minutes. So for all intents and purposes, you have an infinite amount of time to take these things. But of course, these are, the reason it's proctored is you do not get to do the book or the notes or the web or the family members or whomever else. This is meant to be like an in-class closed notebook exam. And so that's what the proctoring piece, of course, is all about. So, yay for that. They are about 50 questions, multiple choice style. So probably something you are more than familiar with at this point. Here's something I do want to emphasize. I want you to know up front, and I'll try to remember to remind you of this when we actually get to that time. But as you know, if you've done these in Canvas before, like the quizzes with the multiple choice, you get that immediate feedback. As soon as you submit the exam, here's what you got right, here's what you missed, and here is your score. So I will tell you right here, right now, and try to remember to tell you later, that's all well and good, okay? And the ones that are marked right and the ones that are marked wrong are accurate and all of that. But that score that you get at the end is tentative. That is to say that the way that this thing is constructed, the way the exams are put together and generated, is a little weird, and I can explain this more down the line. But what happens is once everybody in the course has completed the exam, all the scores are in, that's when I go in and I go through. I'm a little obsessive compulsive in the best way possible. I go through them with a fine-tooth comb. I go through the questions, I go through the items, I run statistics on things. I find if there were bad questions that were involved, that weren't fair or appropriate. I look at the overall distribution of scores, and I do curve, usually, the exams based on the overall distribution of scores in the class. All of this, of course, is to basically say to you, that score that pops up at the end of the midterm exam for you, okay, that's there, but that's very unlikely to actually be your exam score. That score will never go down. There's no situation in which I'm going to go in and detract points away to pull the distribution back downward. But almost without exception, I will go in, I will curve such that that grade gets pulled up. And all grades generally get pulled up. So please just understand that whatever that score is that pops up at the very end of the exam is all but certain to change in however many days it takes for everybody to wrap it up and for me to be able to go in and to do those things. There also will be extra credit options available. That's always the next question, right? So we can cross that bridge a little more as we get further down the line. The ones, you'll already see them listed in the grade book in Canvas. But those, if you look at them, for instance, you will see that they're really geared toward the end of the term. They're kind of retrospective questions, sort of going back to what I was just saying at the very beginning of this, which is to say, great, we all came in here at the beginning of 2020 with some ideas about personality and some concepts surrounding it and whatever. And then this is to say, great, now we have all these weeks, all these readings, all these lectures, all these discussions, all these examples, all this stuff. Now kind of looking back on it, how would you speak to some of these questions? And again, profoundly open-ended, almost impossible to screw up. But those will be for obviously later in the term in that. So that's the first midterm, and that's the second midterm. So the second midterm looks exactly the same as the first, covering only the content from where we left off at the end of the first midterm to where we are then at. This will be in week 8 for the second midterm. Same structure, proctored, closed book, closed notes, 50 items, multiple choice, to be revisited in an OCD way by myself. All the same stuff holds, just different chapters there. And with our online course, these will be set up basically for the week of when the exam is. So these aren't, you need to be here on Monday at 8 a.m. Pacific time or something like that. It'll be available for many, many, many days so that you can fit it in where it's going to make the most sense for you to do it. Okay, that's week 8. Then we have our last couple of weeks moving towards finals. We have a final exam. Don't freak out. Don't freak out, because this is the next part. It's a final essay exam. You're freaking out. Stop. It's an essay exam, but, huge but, Sir Mix-a-Lot but. Did I just say that? Professionalism is the word you're looking for. The final is a brief, short answer essay exam. And it is basically going to ask 2 questions, short answer essays, and I will get into way more depth when we actually get further on and start to approach that time. But I will tell you right now, the way that it sounds is a world away from what it's actually going to be like. There are just the 2 essay questions. They are going to ask extremely specifically about individuals. You'll get you don't know for sure who it'll be, but you're going to see in the modules there are readings about Abraham Maslow and Carl Rogers and Sigmund Freud and a number of people throughout the term who made massive contributions to the content of what we're covering. There are a series of readings at the end of the modules that pertain more directly to those people, a bit about who they were, where they came from, how their ideas developed, and sort of contextually understanding how they fit into the socio-cultural milieu of the time, some of that sort of stuff. And that's what these are going to ask about, is very specifically these readings about these individuals. And again, I will cover this in more depth further down the road, but for the time being, what I would say is, please understand when I say essay exam final for the term, that sounds scary as hell. It couldn't be further from that. It's going to be much, much more straightforward and not nearly as stressful as any of that verbiage would suggest that it is. Take my word for it. Okay. On that note, those are the moving parts that we're going to be dealing with insofar as evaluation goes, the quizzes, the discussions, the exams, and then of course the extra credit that gets involved. All of those things kind of constitute the corpus of how we will be doing the evaluative piece of this class. A quick note kind of about our schedule, due dates, this sort of a thing. You've probably experienced this already, but most of us, particularly in these COVID times, are working as absolutely hard as we can to be as accommodating, flexible, understanding as is humanly possible, just given the immeasurable number of things that are happening in all of our lives. And so what you will see is that the way the course is set up is in our sort of traditional way of weeks, where it says, okay, you need to have a post up for this initial discussion by Tuesday. You need to have your responses and things done by Sunday. The quiz for the week that's set up is due by 11:59 Sunday night for each of the weeks. And I maintain the due dates and sort of the structure insofar as it sort of fits into our modules and our weekly schedule and Canvas and those sorts of things, so that we know where we're at, where we're supposed to be, and basically what the appropriate mileposts along the way looks like. You don't have to wonder if you're behind or ahead or right on track, because these things will tell you precisely where we're supposed to be and what we're supposed to be doing. Great. Having said all of that, those due dates are more malleable than due date would suggest that they are. Should you still be trying to get things done by the due date? Oh, hell yes. Please do. We want to stay on track. We don't want to get behind, I can assure you. And so the better we can adhere to the due dates and things like that, by far the better off we're going to be. That being said, with this increased accommodation and flexibility, these sorts of things, I'm not going to be in the business of penalizing people if it was due at 11:59 p.m. and you got it in the next morning at 10 a.m. or the next evening or something like that. We're not going to sweat these hard and fast due dates and things like that. That looks different in different arenas, okay? So with quizzes, for instance, the quizzes are automatically graded. It's you and your quiz. I see your score, and it has nothing to do with anyone else in the class. So to be very frank about it, if you just wanted to save up all of those quizzes until the last day of finals week and take them all right then, you can. You know how I feel about suggesting that, I hope. But my point being, I mean, you can do those quizzes literally any time that you want to. I hope it intuitively makes sense that it would be a lot better for you to do them kind of on time and in preparation for the exams for which they're preparing you and things like that. But there's nothing that's going to happen if you take a quiz 4 weeks after it was due. So there you have that. Now, that doesn't quite work the same when we start talking about the discussion forums, for instance. Given that there's some asynchrony here, we're all coming to the class kind of as we can and making it work within our lives. That's all well and good. But of course, that's meant to be a communal piece of the course. And so technically, we should all be covering the same content, thinking about the same theories, the same people, the same tests, whatever those things are, reading about them, watching the videos about them, currently having those things within our consciousness, and then of course, bringing those to the platform of the discussions themselves and engaging them in real-ish time with one another, right? Still asynchronous, but this week we have these 2 discussions, and so this week and going into next week, those are the ones I'm going to come back to, respond to the responses on mine, this sort of a thing. I'm not going to come down hard on the due dates with those either, with the exception that in a very real way, though, you can't, I mean, a quiz, if it's 5 weeks after the fact, that doesn't matter. You can do it, and then the points are there, and that's that. If you do a discussion post 5 weeks after everybody else in the class has moved on and hasn't thought about Freud, for a month, and then you're trying to engage the discussion forum, that's not quite the same beast, right? So we can work through this if you find yourself in that position and look at what our options are. But there are rational limitations, right, to how much we can move those things around. And of course, the same goes for the exams. As I said, you have the latitude within that week of multiple days, any time of day that you want to fit that thing in for yourself. But just be aware, like that's not something you can't wait till finals week to do the midterm, and the final. The exams need to be done by the time the exams need to be done, or we need to be in touch and figuring out why there's an excused reason to do an extension or something like that. If that's your situation, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Otherwise, just know up front, we have this flexibility with due dates and things like that, but keep in mind just the rational parameters, right? That do or do not make sense in relation to those. And if those things are not clear to you, as I've said over and over, please let me know. And on that front, that's where I want to just say one